Single mother brings her daughter to work and the millionaire CEO recognizes the pendant the little girl is wearing. And he's shocked by the truth. Before we start the story, leave a comment telling us what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Mom, can I put my drawing in the window? Sophie asked, already running around the elegant cafe in the lobby of the Parker Tower before even hearing the answer. Sophie, stay close to me. Kate tried to grab her, but the girl was already crossing the polished lobby, chatting with security guards and receptionists, as if they were old friends. The sound of expensive shoes echoed through the hall. Daniel Parker, CEO of Parker and Company, was striding quickly across the space, phone pressed to his ear, clearly in a hurry. As he bent down to pick up the pen he had dropped, he came face to face with Sophie. "Hi," she said, grinning from ear to ear. He gave her a polite smile until his gaze landed on the silver pendant swinging from the girl's neck. A circle with a small 4 engraving, impossible to mistake. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. A distant summer flashed in his mind. Laughter by the shore, a young woman with sparkling eyes, and him placing that very pendant around her neck before saying goodbye, not knowing they would never see each other again. His voice came out lower than he meant. "Where did you get that necklace?" Sophie blinked. "Innocent. Mom gave it to me," she said. "It's important." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had to find out who this 5-girl's mother was and whether she was the same woman he had never been able to forget. He stood still for a few seconds, watching Sophie run back toward the cafe. The pendant kept swinging, each movement stirring memories he had tried to bury for years. Taking a deep breath, he followed her, trying to look casual as he walked toward Manhattan Brews. Through the glass doors, he saw a woman behind the counter. Brown hair, pulled into a messy bun, navy blue uniform, moving quickly as she filled orders. Even from the back, something sick about her posture felt familiar. When she turned, Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Kate, no doubt about it. The same expressive eyes, the same smile that used to light up her face when she laughed at his bad jokes. Of course, she had changed. A more mature face, a few faint lines that hadn't been there 15 years ago. But it was her. Definitely. Her. "Mom, look." The penman. Sophie pointed at Daniel, who was still outside, clearly watching through the glass. Kate looked up and made a face of mild impatience. "Sophie, come back here. And you, sir, if you want something, you'll have to come in and order like everyone else." Daniel pushed the door open, trying to seem natural. He walked up to the counter with what he hoped was a charming smile, but Kate had already turned her attention back to the espresso machine. "Good morning. One Americano, please," he said, trying to make eye contact. "Size?" Kate asked without looking at him, busy filling another cup. "Large. And it's a beautiful morning, isn't it?" Kate finally met his eyes, her expression making it clear she saw him as just 5. Another board executive trying to make small talk. "Sir, it's 8:59 in the morning. I've got 15 orders in line and a daughter running loose. If you want to talk about the weather, I suggest you call the meteorology service." Some customers in line chuckled quietly. Daniel felt his face warm, but he pressed on. "Of course, sorry. It's just that your daughter is very sweet. She reminds me of 350. Kate cut him off, handing him the cup. Next, at that moment, Sophie came running with a tray of sugar she had grabbed from a nearby table. In her rush to show Daniel she could help Mom, she bumped into his arm just as he was about to take a sip. Hot coffee spilled across Daniel's white Italian shirt, a brown stain spreading quickly over the expensive fabric. A few customers gasped and Sophie's eyes went wide. "Oh no, I'm sorry." Daniel expected Kate to shower him with apologies and offered to pay for dry cleaning. Instead, she simply reached under the counter, pulled out a clean apron, and handed it to him. "Here, it'll look better than that shirt all messed up," she said with an amused smile. Besides, now you have a legitimate excuse for being late to your meeting. How do you know I have a meeting? Because every man in a suit who comes rushing in here at 9 o'clock in the morning has a meeting. And they're usually the same ones who try to talk about the weather when it's obvious they're just trying to impress someone. More laughter from the customers. Daniel, holding the apron, wasn't sure if he should be annoyed or impressed by her reply. Sophie, next time you want to help, ask first, Kate told her daughter. But without harshness. Now go play with your drawings while mommy works. Is he going to be mad at me? Sophie asked, looking at Daniel with big eyes. No, sweetheart. Daniel crouched down to her level. It was an accident. Accidents happen. Sophie smiled in relief and ran to a corner table where paper and colored pencils were scattered. Daniel turned back to Kate, who was already working on the next order. Thanks for the apron. You're welcome. And next time, drink your coffee more carefully or keep your distance from my daughter when she's in helper mode. Daniel laughed, tying the apron over his stained shirt. Noted. On the 47th floor of the Parker Tower, Daniel was trying to focus on the quarterly presentation happening in an activity at the entrance of Manhattan Brews. It couldn't be a coincidence. Kate, living in New York, working in the very building he passed every day with a daughter wearing the pendant he'd given her 15 years ago. The odds were astronomical. Marcus, he called through the intercom. His assistant appeared at the door in seconds, tablet in hand and wearing his usual efficient expression. I need you to discreetly look into someone. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. In 5 years working for Daniel, he had learned not to ask unnecessary questions. Kate. Daniel realized he didn't know her last name. The woman who works at the cafe downstairs, brown hair, has a young daughter. I want to know where she lives, age 6, how long she's worked here, her family situation, the basics. Understood. When do you need it? Yesterday. Marcus nodded and left. Daniel looked back out the window, drumming his fingers on the desk. If it 6:47 really was her, why hadn't she recognized him? Or had she and she was pretending not to? And the daughter? How old was she? 6, 7. A knot tightened in his stomach. He did a quick calculation in his head and didn't like the answer. Meanwhile, at the cafe, Kate was fighting her own battle. Rodriguez. Margaret's sharp voice. The supervisor rang out across the place. My office. Now. Kate sighed, asked Jenny, the other employee, to keep an eye on Sophie and followed Margaret into the small back room. Sit, Margaret ordered, crossing her arms. She was a woman in her 50s, always wearing an expression like she just sucked on a lemon. How many times have I told you this is no place for a child? Margaret, I explained. The babysitter canceled last minute and I couldn't miss work. I don't want to hear your excuses. This is a business, not a daycare, and now your daughter is spilling coffee on customers. Kate felt irritation rising. It was an accident and the customer didn't complain. Doesn't matter. Either you fix the situation or you'll need to find another job. And let me tell you, jobs for people without a college degree aren't exactly easy to come by. The zero comment about her degree felt like a punch to the gut, but Kate kept her face neutral. Over the years, she had learned that showing vulnerability to people like Margaret was like handing them ammunition for more attacks. I understand your position, Kate said, standing. Can I get back to work now? 19. Margaret waved dismissively and Kate left the room. Outside, she noticed some nearby customers had overheard the conversation. Her face grew warm with embarrassment. Hey, don't let her get to you, said a man in his 40s, sipping a cappuccino. I've got 3 kids. I know how hard it can be. That's true, agreed a woman at the next table. That woman treats everyone badly. The other day, she was super rude to me because I asked for a different type of milk. Thank you. Kate smiled, genuinely touched by the solidarity. You're very kind. Your daughter is adorable, said another customer. She came over to show me the picture she drew. A family of 3 holding hands. Very sweet. Kate looked over at Sophie, who had returned to her table and was now drawing intently, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Her heart warmed, and she decided that for today, that was 3. What mattered? Sophie does that a lot, she told the customers. I think she wants to be an artist when she grows up. Or a diplomat. The man laughed. She convinced the security guard over there to let her use his pen to draw. Kate looked and saw Sophie showing something to the guard, who smiled and waved at her. Even in difficult circumstances, her daughter managed to brighten people's days. It was a gift Kate envied. Marcus returned to Daniel's office 2 hours later, his tablet loaded with information. I got the basic details, he said, placing the tablet on the desk. Kate Rodriguez, 32 years old, single, lives in Queens, Renson apartment. She's been working here for 8 months, morning shift, also works part-time at a laundromat 3 blocks away. 1 child, Sophie Rodriguez, 6 years old. Daniel skimmed the information quickly. Nothing about the girl's father? Not in the records. From what I could quietly find out, she's been raising her daughter alone from the start. And the pendant the girl wears. Marcus frowned. Pendant? Never mind. Daniel muttered, realizing how odd that sounded. Anything else? Just that she seems to be a good employee, never missed a day, never late, and customers like her. Aside from today's incident with the supervisor. What incident? Marcus recounted the conversation he'd overheard about Margaret threatening to fire Kate because of her daughter. Daniel felt a pang of guilt, since technically the whole thing had started when Sophie spilled coffee on him. Anything else? Only a personal observation. Marcus hesitated. This kind of digging into employees, it's not your usual style. Mind if I ask why? Daniel looked out the window again. Down below, he could see Kate wiping tables in the cafe's outdoor seating area. Sophie 4. Playing nearby. It's complicated, Marcus. And maybe I'm imagining connections that aren't there. The pendant could be common, Marcus said, as if reading his thoughts. Jewelry stores sell thousands just like it. Daniel 8. Nodded, but wasn't convinced. Something about the way Sophie had said, Mommy gave it to me and said it's important, kept echoing in his mind. And now, watching Kate from a distance, all the memories of that long ago summer came rushing back. He needed to be sure one way or another. Over the next 3 days, Daniel developed an odd routine for a CEO, heading downstairs to stretch his legs every day between 10 and 10:30 in the morning, exactly when Sophie was most energetic and chatting with everyone in the cafe. On Monday, he arrived while she was explaining to an elderly customer why cats were better than dogs. On Tuesday, she was teaching a businesswoman how to make paper airplanes out of napkins. And on Wednesday, she had convinced 2 security guards to join a drawing contest. You again, Kate said when she saw him approaching the counter for the 3rd time that week. Let me guess. Large Americano. Actually, today I'll have a cappuccino, Daniel smiled, watching Sophie, who had just figured out how to make the sugar dispenser play music by tapping it with a spoon. Your daughter is very creative. That's a polite way to put it. Kate laughed, grabbing a cup. Sophie, stop making music with the utensils. But it sounds nice, Mom. Listen. Sophie tapped out a rhythmic beat that was surprisingly melodic. Some customers clapped and she gave a theatrical bow. Daniel couldn't help but laugh. She definitely has personality, he commented. Kate studied him for a moment. Can I ask you something? Why does a man like you keep showing up here? I mean, I'm sure you have plenty of coffee options in the city. Daniel felt his face warm. A man like me, you know, rich, important, probably has an assistant who can fetch 7 coffee for him. Kate finished making the cappuccino and set it on the counter. $5.75. As he reached for his wallet, Daniel tried to come up with an answer that wouldn't sound completely crazy. Actually, I'm almost certain you're the woman I met 15 years ago and never forgot. And your daughter is wearing the pendant I gave you. Maybe I just like the atmosphere, he said, handing her a $10 bill. It's authentic. Authentic? Kate repeated, giving him the change. That's a new one. Sophie appeared beside Daniel, tugging at his dress pants. "Can I tell you a secret?" she whispered, loudly enough for half the cafe to hear. "Sophie," Kate warned. "Mom thinks you're handsome," but she told Aunt Jenny that men in suits are trouble. The silence that followed was broken only by the espresso machine. Kate closed her eyes, clearly wishing the floor would swallow her whole. "Sophie Rodriguez, you're going a week without drawing if you don't stop talking nonsense." "But it's true," Sophie protested. "You said he has interesting eyes." Daniel tried to hide a smile, but it was impossible. "Interesting eyes? Please ignore my daughter, who has apparently decided to become a professional gossip." Kate could answer. His phone rang. It was Marcus. "Excuse me," he said, picking up. "Hi, Marcus." "Daniel, the meeting with the Japanese investors was moved up to 11 o'clock. You need to come up now." Daniel glanced at his watch. 10:45. "All right, I'm on my way." He hung up and looked at Kate, an idea forming in his mind. "Actually, there is something you can do for me." 45 minutes later, Kate was in the elevator holding a tray of coffee and trying not to panic. What had started as a simple request, "Can you bring a coffee up to my office once things calm down here?" now felt like a questionable decision. The elevator stopped on the 47th floor, and the doors opened to reveal a space that looked straight out of an architecture magazine. Marble floors, glass walls, modern art hanging in perfect symmetry, and a breathtaking view of Manhattan. "Wow," she murmured, walking toward the reception desk. "Can I help you?" asked a receptionist, impeccably dressed. "I brought coffee for Mr. Parker from the cafe downstairs." The receptionist gave her a strange look, as if Kate had said she came to feed the unicorns, but pointed toward a hallway, last door on the right. Kate walked down the corridor, taking in the expensive paintings and plants that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She stopped in front of a massive wooden door with a gold plaque. "Daniel Parker, CEO." She knocked lightly. "Come in," came his voice from the other side. Kate pushed the door open and almost dropped the tray. The office was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. There was a sitting area with Italian leather sofas, and Daniel's desk was a one-of-a-kind glass and metal piece that probably cost more than her car. "Wow," she said without thinking. "This is well." Daniel was on the phone but motioned for her to come in. Kate stepped carefully toward the desk, trying not to trip over the Persian rug covering part of the floor. "Yes, I understand," Daniel was saying into the phone. "Confirm for Monday." Then he hung up and smiled at Kate. "Thanks for coming up. You can set it right here on the desk." Kate stepped closer to the desk, which was covered in papers, 2 open laptops, and several expensive pens scattered around. She tried to find a free spot for the tray when her eyes landed on a framed photo. A younger Daniel on some beach, smiling at the camera with his arm around her. The shock made her hands wobble and the tray tilted. The sugar packet she had brought scattered, some falling directly onto the open laptop keyboard. "Oh no," she exclaimed, trying to grab them. "I'm so too sorry." "I don't worry about it," Daniel said quickly, standing to help. "It's nothing," but Kate barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the photo. It was her, no doubt. Younger with longer hair. Wearing a blue blouse she remembered perfectly. And next to her, a younger Daniel with the same smile he was trying to hide now. "Tate, are you all right?" Before she could answer, the office door opened and a woman walked in without knocking. Tall blonde, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Kate's monthly salary. "Daniel, I need you to sign these." The woman stopped when she saw Kate, her expression shifting instantly. "Oh, Veronica," Daniel said, and Kate caught a note of tension in his voice. Kate was just bringing coffee. Veronica looked Kate up and down with an expression that was somehow both condescending and territorial. "Kate," she repeated slowly. "Kate Rodriguez." Kate blinked in surprise. "You know me?" "Of course I do." Veronica smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You used to live on Maple Street, right? 2 houses down from my cousin Lucia." I was there all zero. The time. Kate's stomach tightened. Maple Street had been where she lived during her teenage years in a small house she shared with her mother and 2 brothers. They weren't memories she liked to revisit. That was a long time. How people change, isn't it? Some for the better, others. She shrugged. Well, at least you managed to get a job. Downstairs. The implication was clear, and Kate felt her face grow hot with indignation. Veronica, Daniel began, but she ignored him. It's interesting. Veronica went on toying with an expensive pen. A girl from Maple Street. Now personally bringing coffee to the CEO. Some might say that's convenient. What exactly are you implying? Kate asked, dropping any pretense of politeness. I'm not implying anything. Veronica said with an innocent smile. I just find it curious how certain people always seem to find ways to get close to successful men, especially single mothers who need to support their children. The silence that followed was tense. Kate felt anger rising in her chest, but before she could answer, Daniel stepped between them. Veronica, 32. That's enough. Relax, Daniel. Veronica laughed. I'm sure Kate understands I'm just making an observation. After all, it's not the first time I've seen this kind of strategy. Kate picked up the empty tray and headed for the door. My coffee's paid for and delivered. Can I get back to work now? Kate, wait. Daniel. Trying to study the trembling in her hands. The photo on Daniel's desk, Veronica's poisonous comments, the way he had been showing up at the cafe every day. Something very strange was going on, and Kate had the feeling she was being manipulated in a way she couldn't quite understand yet. Kate had barely reached the ground floor when she heard the sharp sound of high heels quickly coming down the emergency stairs. Veronica burst into the lobby like a lawn hurricane, clearly determined not to let the conversation end upstairs. To Tate, she called, loud enough for half the cafe to look over. You forgot to bring your tray back. Kate stopped, realizing several people had paused their conversations to watch. Among them, she recognized a few executives who frequented the cafe and some regular customers. Thank you, Kate said simply, holding out her hand to take the tray. But Veronica wasn't interested in a quiet exchange. Instead, very interesting upstairs. Our cafe employee here had a private meeting with the CEO. Kate felt her stomach drop. It wasn't a meeting. I just delivered coffee. Of course, Veronica laughed. That's what they all say. I was just delivering coffee. Funny how these coincidences always seem to involve women who are, how shall I put it, in need. A murmur started to ripple through the crowd. Kate saw Jenny, her coworkers, step out from behind the counter with a worried expression. Excuse me? One of the executives asked. What exactly are you talking about? Veronica smiled like a cat that had found a mouse. Well, isn't it obvious? A single mother working 2 jobs suddenly gets direct access to the CEO's office. Do you think what your problem is with me? My problem? Veronica feigned surprise. I have no problem at all. I just think it's interesting to observe how some people operate, especially when they have children to support and, well, few options. Hold on. A regular customer, Mrs. Chin, stood from her table. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Veronica said, raising her hands dramatically. I'm just it's curious how certain women always find ways to get close to men with money, especially when they're came from Kate. Wow, she said, shaking her head. You really practiced that speech in the mirror before running down here, didn't you? A few customers chuckled quietly. Veronica frowned. Excuse me? Kate crossed her arms and smiled. I'm just impressed by your level of dedication. I mean, you ran down the stairs. Everyone saw you out of 22:50 breath just to make a scene about me taking coffee upstairs. That's intense. More laughter now. Louder this time. 22:58's face began to turn red. I'm not making a scene. You're not? Kate looked around. Because where I come from, when someone puts on a show like this in the middle of a cafe, we call it 23:0 drama, or maybe envy. Hard to tell. Envy? Veronica nearly shouted. Of you? I don't know. Kate shrugged. You're the one who chased me down here to talk about my life. I didn't chase you to. 23:22 to yours. The impromptu audience began murmuring their approval. Jenny started clapping slowly but I can assure you it has nothing to do with me. I work here. I do my job and I go home to take care of my one daughter. If that bothers you so much, maybe the problem isn't me. You don't know anything, Veronica exploded. You don't know Daniel like I do. Women like you always show up trying to take advantage of successful men. Women like me, Kate repeated, her voice turning colder, who work honestly to support their children. Just then, Sophie came running from the children's playground in the cafe's courtyard. She had heard raised voices and came to investigate. Mom, she asked, sensing the tension. Everyone staring. Veronica saw an opportunity and pointed at the little girl. And there's the proof. A child. Without a father, being raised by a mother who clearly can't manage without stop. Sophie shouted, startling everyone. Fists clenched, wearing a furious expression that was almost comical on her 6-year-old face. My mom is the best mom in the world. Sophie went on, her voice carrying across the cafe. She works really hard to take care of me, and you're a mean person for talking like that. A collective or rippled through the crowd. Veronica, clearly not expecting to be challenged by a child, hesitated. Sophie, honey, Kate began, trying to calm her. But Sophie wasn't done. With the straightforward logic of a 6-year-old, she looked around at all the watching faces and made a decision that would change everything. And besides, she said, pointing at Daniel, who had just stepped out of the elevator after hearing the commotion, my daddy is going to be really mad if you keep yelling at my mommy. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the cafe turned to stare at Daniel, who froze in the middle of the lobby as if he'd been hit. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. Sophie, don't. Daddy, Veronica repeated, her voice shooting up an octave. Daddy. The murmuring spread through the cafe like wildfire. People began whispering urgently to each other, some pulling out their phones to record. Wait, one of the executives said slowly. Daniel Parker has a daughter with the cafe employee, another added. And never acknowledged her. A third voice asked, horrified. Daniel stood rooted to the spot, clearly in shock. His eyes moved from Sophie to Kate, then to the crowd of accusing faces around him. This is, he began, but his voice faltered. This is disgusting, Mrs. Chen said, shaking her head. A rich man who won't even acknowledge his own child. What kind of person is that? Another customer. Tear up. I just wanted her to stop yelling, she said softly.